So thank you everybody for joining Cafecito Chats. Today we will be talking about interview tips, and each of us will go ahead and share our perspective on interviewing. Right? Good things, bad things. A couple of questions to consider is when you actually go through an interview, what should you actually and definitely do during the interview or in preparation for the interview? Things to avoid during an interview. What should you definitely not do during an interview or after an interview? And how should you properly follow up after an interview? Those are key questions that maybe with our experience and or knowledge or insights we can definitely share with each other and the audience obviously here. So couple things when you're nowadays we're in a virtual environment right now, and for the most part a lot of interviews tend to happen via video nowadays. Before it was seldomly common, it was less common, it was more common to do it on the phone, but now I've started seeing a pivot more into the virtual camera on virtual interviews for the first, at least first or second interview cycles. And then when they actually call you into the actual office is when they give you the opportunity to go on site, right? So those are the things that I know. One of the things that I always tell individuals if they're going to have an interview, even if it's on the phone, assume that you're going to be in person, quote unquote. So at least dress properly, dress professional, even if it's on the phone. It'll give you a different feel. It'll give you that confidence boost. It'll make you, in your mind, be in that professional environment and state of mind. One of the things that I tell people not to do is don't just have dress, right? Don't just have dress, because as we saw, Mr. Mike stood up right now and we could see his pants, or had he had shorts, we would have been seeing that. So sometimes I know that some candidates have had to actually go and close the door or something like that, and they get up inadvertently, and all of a sudden you see that their slacks are not slacks, they're just jeans, and they have a suit or at least a sports coat on, but the bottom is just a jeans. So it just creates a different perspective from the interviewer, right? The other thing is, I've noticed that some of the interviewers will go ahead and do an interview without turning the camera on. So I always tell the interviewee, the student or the person seeking the job, regardless of whether the individual conducting the interview turns on their camera or not, you, who's the interested party, go ahead and turn on your camera. Your camera ready at 100% of the time, even if it's just you and another individual. You have to be able to feel comfortable and make sure that you show your presence and make your presence felt through the camera, right? So those are little things that I advise individuals to do. If it's going to be a video call and or a phone call, just assume that is that. We're gonna get started with Lourdes. Lourdes Sarmiento, thank you for joining us. Any thoughts or any comments or insights at the moment in regards to interviewing tips or interview tips that you want to share with us?
I would say hi everybody. I would say more like just be prepared, do your research, practice a few times with somebody else, with the camera, even do the same setup and everything, make them ask like hard questions. You can even look up questions on some websites, like practice questions, and they can ask you that so you can be prepared, practice your answer, worked out like your nervousness, so by the time you interview, you're good and prepared and ready to go and confident. Because if you don't practice, then you're kind of like walking into a fire. And if it goes south, then I don't know. It's hard to bounce back. It's not impossible, but it's just hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's assume that you really feel after that interview that you bombed it, right? Well, there's a learning moment for you. You could go ahead and take the rest of the day to think about what you didn't do well. Think about things that maybe didn't quite materialize as you thought, and go ahead and re-pivot and pivot and make sure that you take heed and take some advice, as Lourdes was alluding to. Make sure that you practice with those individuals, friends of yours, if you hadn't practiced, right? We have artificial intelligence, ChatGPT in this case, or Google, and ask Google or ChatGPT, what interview questions should I practice? And it'll give you a list. When you come up with that list, you craft based on your resume, based on your personal experience, craft responses and jot them down so that you can go ahead and have at least an open liner to whenever some question similar to those that you got will definitely help and support your efforts. I saw Mr. Mike Cruz raise his hands, and then we'll go over to Lourdes.
Yeah, I have a quick question since I'm not too familiar with these online interviews. Uh, are they recorded? Can you record your interview with them? And that would be, if you could, then that would be the learning tool that you could do to help you review what you had just done.
So those, if you have, because you're doing it on your own device, let's assume that you're doing this on your laptop, desktop. If you have the ability to record on your screen, then you can record those. However, some individuals actually do it on their phone. If you have an app that actually records the screen on your phone, you can also record it there. But just be careful that you have enough memory, otherwise it'll just saturate it and you won't be able to record the whole thing, right? Some instances, for example, if you're doing it through Zoom and they give you a link, you cannot record using Zoom unless you have capability on your desktop or on your screen to actually record the screen. So it has to be an app or application that can actually record your own screen. Most companies will not grant you access to record using the video link that they give you. So you have to record on your own. They do advise you not to post any of that material. So if you're the interviewee, please be aware that don't post on LinkedIn, social media, Instagram saying, I had an interview with XYZ company. I'm really happy, because it might actually come back and bite you, and it'll just diminish the opportunities of you actually getting a call back for an offer. Just making that disclaimer right off the top, right? Lourdes, you had your hand up?
Most of the interviews that I've had is they send me the invite, they send me the link, they have control of everything. It's not recorded, or else it would tell you, like Zoom, I think.
Correct.
Uh, I was gonna say that I also like to use the STAR method for interview, just to give like the situation, the task, the result, and what I learned from it as well. And that's the advice I give everybody, to be clear, concise, and to not ramble. So when I practice using that technique.
Yeah, correct. So for those of you who didn't catch that, the STAR methodology: situation, task, action, and result. A lot of individuals actually go and answer and try to utilize the STAR method. They talk about the situation, they talk about the task, they talk about the action, but seldomly mention the final result, mainly because they get so caught up in the action that they don't tell the interviewer the result of the outcome of the actual process that they went through. Good or bad, just blurt it out there. And if it didn't go quite to plan, go ahead and make sure that you tell them it didn't go quite to plan, but give them a follow up that you did. Give them additional information. I learned from this situation, etc., etc., and allow them to see that you are an individual that has an open mindset, that you continue to grow, that you keep going, and make sure that that follows up. So that's good advice there, Lourdes. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Mr. Alex Polo, any insights on interview tips that you might have, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, basically agree with everything that's been said. I mean, dressing sharply, suit and tie is, you know, a must. One thing too is, you know, make sure you write your own resume, and because the questions that will be asked to you will come from there, many of them. So if you don't write it yourself, let's say you use AI and stuff, and you didn't even bother to review it, then you might be caught off track, with some of the questions that will be asked of you. If it's an in-person interview, be there early. Don't even 5 minutes. I think it's late. I think 10 minutes. You should at least shoot for that. And yeah, when you're sitting in front of the person that's interviewing you, don't slouch. Sit up straight. Use confidence in your words and what you're answering. Ask questions. I mean, yeah, it's an interview, but it's a two-way street. Don't just have all the questions thrown at you. You also want to know about the company, what their goals are, in the next 5 years, how your position will fit in with the goals of the company. And even one question that I also like to ask too is, so the previous person that had my role, how could I be better than them, or how what do you expect me to do different, if anything? So yeah, those types of questions, we'll get the conversation going. They'll see that you are interested, and also, I mean, research the company. I know, that's an obvious thing, but see what they do, and their technology, and then ask questions about that as well. What makes them where they are in the market? Are they number one? Are they trying to be number one? So it's things like that. You could point out, hey, I could definitely help you try to get there with my skills, whatever their goals are. So yeah,
Thank you,
just a
sir.
couple.
Great insight. Great insight. I want to take a moment to address the first comments that you threw out there, right? You talked about getting there on time. And getting there on time makes a big difference if you're going in person or if you're online, right? A lot of individuals assume that if they're online, they can actually just go ahead and log in and everything will work 5 minutes before. Sometimes your internet reception is not good in the location that you're in, right? Let's say that you're rushing and you're heading into a conference room that you assumed was going to be free. All of a sudden, you have 5 minutes and you're scrambling because that conference room is booked and you can't do that virtual interview there. How do you pivot, right? So make sure that you allow yourself 20, 30 minutes to accommodate the computer, laptop, make sure that the connection plugs in. We talked about making sure that you do a test run, maybe a Teams meeting set up with a friend. Say, hey, 30 minutes before my conference, can I call you and make sure that the picture, the image, my video is perfect, or it comes across on your screen, and that way I can verify that my computer is not the problem. Make sure that you have the correct link, right? I know that some students or some individuals actually get the invite through email, and all of a sudden they misplace the email and they don't know exactly where that link is. They never made a copy of it, so you can't access the meeting, right? Or make sure that you double check the date and the time. We're in this virtual environment. A lot of companies operate East time. We're in Pacific time. We're in California. So make sure that you know what time zone you're in, right? Or what time zone the meeting or the actual interview session is going to be. If it's in person, make sure that you know traffic patterns. If it's at 8 o'clock in the morning, take note of what the traffic is during that time frame, right? How long is it really going to take me to get from my house to the location? Do I know if it's actually in this building that I'm going to check in, but the actual interview is 5 minutes away from that particular building? Do I have to go through check-in, security? Do I have to badge in? All of that makes a difference, and that could add up to 30, 40 minutes that you have to get there before the actual interview, versus, in addition, you also have to take into account maybe half an hour to 45 minutes of traffic commuting time. Make sure that you are aware of all of that, right? Lourdes, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have a funny story about time zones. I had an interview with Michigan. They're on East Coast time, West Coast, and Their interview was at 8 a.m. East Coast time. That was 5 a.m. here. And I didn't ask to reschedule because, I was like, maybe that's when the managers have the time. I'll just wake up that week super early and be like coherent and awake by that time. And it did work out, but it was definitely something different. I wasn't used to that. So yeah, time zones do matter.
It's a good point, Lourdes. And you, as the individual that actually has received the invitation, you also have the ability to respond back to the recruiter and say, hello, yes, I appreciate the opportunity. However, is this an opportunity that maybe we can have it at a different time? And give them a reason why, right? If you have a test or if you have another commitment and they never really asked, be open about it. Your communication goes both ways. They give you, and you can actually accept or reschedule or try to reschedule. So, the way that I tell students or individuals to do it is write an email back saying, thank you, I appreciate the opportunity, really looking forward to this interview with so and so. However, I do have a conflict and I would like to propose this date on this time. I normally ask for three different times and maybe one or two different days that accommodate to you, that gives them more of an opportunity to reschedule. Or at the end, you can say, however, if this is the only time that the individual conducting the interview, I will definitely be there. Note that I need to leave 5 minutes before the time because I have other commitments. They will more than likely accommodate to one of the other times. Just make sure that you're right on those times because you are committing to those times, right? And they're trying to accommodate to you now. And if you don't show up, that really looks really bad on you. So before do this request of accommodation a couple days before. As soon as you know that there's a conflict, make sure that you write an email back. Don't just accept the time and live with it, and don't tell them that you don't let them know that you do have a conflict. Make sure that that is communicated ahead of time if they cannot reschedule you for that. All right. So that's great. Thanks, Lourdes. Thanks for adding to that. We have Harriel Corsair. Thank you, sir. How are you?
Doing very good today. Doing very good,
Thank you
and thank you
so
so much, Lazaro, for the invite. And hey, I'm here learning as well because times have changed, right? So I don't know, a couple old heads, not used to all of this online type of functions that have to do with interviewing. But these are all things that you have to take into account. And I just want to take a second and say that, Alex, I really understand what you were saying as well. That's one thing that I always talk to youngsters when I'm telling them about their interview is to investigate the company, right? Go there, and you're not on the hot seat. Sometimes they have to be on the hot seat. And you know what? It does make a difference. I remember when I was applying for a position with the Federal Aviation Administration, and I had an interview with the chief of flight safety. So I did a little check on him, right? Went and checked him out and stuff. And then when I'm talking to him on the interview, and I was asking him, I said, "Hey, look, you used to work at TWA and da 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 da. Can you tell me about your times with them and what made you come to a federal position?" You know, um, it kind of put him in a position where he had to go back and kind of recant. What he had done in his past, and so and he's basically giving me clues as well into going from like uh, into a government position and the differences in the government position and just kind of understanding the whole spectrum. So yes, you're right. You're there applying for the position, but you want to make sure that you understand exactly what you're getting into and the differences in the positions as well.
Thank you, sir. Great insight, great perspective. Thank you. Shifting over to Mindy Farrell. Mindy, we've been talking about interview tips. Is there anything that you would like to share from what you've heard in addition or supplementing something that we've touched on?
I actually decided to start typing some of it up because some people were already talking about it. Things that I kind of thought of were print out the role that you applied for ahead of time. It's really helpful for practicing, but it's also helpful during the actual interview. And especially if you applied for multiple positions within a company, verify which role you're actually being interviewed for. It can be easy to mistake because sometimes it's different hiring managers and they don't realize different HR people are talking, and all of a sudden you've took down the wrong role for the position that you're interviewing for. So have a copy of that ready. Ask about the interview format ahead of time. Not all questions are behavioral questions. I work at a national laboratory. I had to solve, which is 10 years after being in 10, 15 years after being in industry, I still had to go talk about like circuit analysis, which I hadn't had to do explicitly in a number of years, but it's a technical location. So be aware, because I know other companies like Google tend to do that, and ask what that format's like so you can prepare adequately for that. There's generally always going to be some behavioral questions, but you don't want to be caught off guard, especially in a STEM industry with technical questions. As you're practicing, think about the 3 takeaways you want people to walk away with. And all of your answers should be curated towards that. That every time you have an example, you're hitting on one of those 3 takeaways that you're doing. So that's where that really upfront prep helps, researching those common questions. Tell me about a time when you had a conflict. Tell me about yourself. That should be really concise. You should be able to hit those very quickly and easily. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Have an answer for that. The amount of times I've seen people not have at least a basic answer for that's really high, because we know it's going to change, right? If you're interviewing for a position, but we can see the types of things you like when that question is asked. Practice confidence. And for me, that's power poses, taking the time to breathe, relax, be open. And you have the skills that otherwise you wouldn't have applied or even been selected to interview for this position. So remind yourself of that. And practice, 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 rehearse it with people. It feels silly. Even as 15 years later, when I'm practicing for roles, even within my own companies, I'll practice it at home with my husband or with a friend, actually asking those questions and seeing how concise do I get my statements? Do they sound clear and concise? When you're in, don't badmouth a previous employer. Sometimes we leave jobs because we really wanted out of that job. Try to pretend that's not the reason why you're applying. Try to pretend you want to grow yourself in a different way, and that's going to put you in a different mindset that's just going to have a better mindset when you're in front of an employer. Those prepped questions, I think Alex really hit on those. Try not to have too many. Here's some of the like most common ones I tend to ask because I'm trying to get a feel for a company. What does the day-to-day look like in this job? Um, is this a new position or a vacated position? That will usually tell you a lot about culture without having to be strange about the reason for that. Um, what does success look like in that role, or beneficial skills? Because that's a way to respond back of those things. You're like, oh, you said those things. Here's my 3 takeaways that perfectly line up with what you wanted, right? But then if you don't have one of those skills, you can be like, ooh, maybe this isn't a match, or maybe that's something I'm going to need to work on. Whether electronically or if it's in person, have a copy of your resume available for that. And then last one was prepare for technical questions. So when I dropped them in the chat, but I think everyone kind of touched on these to an extent.
Thank you. That's great insight, great perspective. Let me see, Mr. Mike Cruz, anything that you would like to add from the conversation so far?
Yeah, a couple of things. I'm just thinking back at the interviews we did at UCSD a couple of weeks back, and some of the students that I had to interact with. That was face to face, but now I'm thinking about this online, how you deal with that. Well, one thing came to mind as face to face, you can do your QR code and exchange contact information. So I guess online, you need to make sure that there's a way for you to contact or follow up with that person or whoever is involved with that interview online.
Okay.
So follow up is important. The other thing is that I always ask them, why are you here? And interviewers shouldn't have to ask that question. If at the interviewee, you should be dynamic and you should start the conversation. I'm here because of I'm desiring a position. Da 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 da. Almost kind of spurt out your opening statement and on your resume or why you want to work there. The other thing was I had some overzealous students believe it or not, they were so animated
Okay.
that they were over animated. They were, I mean, they were like jumping, just, they were doing this, and I just said, calm down, I'll listen to you. So, and it was real. I mean, there were some students that were just over animated about being there and tried to be overly expressive about being there. Uh, you don't, you need to be confident in your presentation and why you're there. So again, your gestures, the way you animate yourself both online and in person are important. You need to express that air of confidence about the company, about what you're seeking, and what you can provide. So I think those are important things that the interviewee needs to know. Online, I think everything's been kind of covered, and that's good because they need to be prepared, know why they're there, and start the conversation. I had one student that come up and looked at me. He was just looking at me. Now, I didn't say anything, and and I'm going, "Why are you here?"
Right.
And so never have the interviewer start the conversation. You got to be in there and state why you're there. So those are a couple of things that I experienced in the last couple of weeks from actual students trying to do an interview. I know that it was a quick 2 or 3 minute jaunt, but those are things that jumped out at me.
Right.
That this and I reflected back to the students that you need to work on those things.
Right, right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. One of the harder ones, we talk about the virtual environment, doing video face to face with somebody that's live on the other side of the screen, right? However, there's companies that actually send you a link to record yourself. They give you a prompt. They give you a prompt so you're not talking to an individual on the other side of the screen. You are literally recording yourself. And I know this for a fact that Disney does this, and ASML does this. They will send you a link and you record yourself. That's the first type of interview filter that you will go through. If they like that, when they see it, they will go ahead and give you a call back for a phone or video interview with a manager, right? So I believe from what I've experienced, what I've heard other students talk about, other individuals that go through that, it's very difficult because you have this prompt. It's a general prompt, right? And you're not getting any feedback on the screen other than yourself. And it's really, really awkward and cumbersome to do that. And the thing is that when you actually hit the record button, it has 3, 2, 1, and it starts recording, and then you have to select stop. So it's an interesting process when you go through with it, and you have 2 tries to answer the prompt correctly, right? And there's really, if you, the last one is literally the one that you'll be left with if you decide to burn those 2 tries. So just make sure that you're aware of it. Make sure that if you don't feel comfortable recording initially, that you practice and practice with other individuals. So that's a little bit of a different situation that I've seen, where you actually have to record yourself, and it's not necessarily talking to an individual like Mr. Mike or Harry or Alex, Mindy or Lourdes, where you get immediate feedback. You don't have that, right? You don't have the ability to ask them questions. It's just the general database repository video that is going into the company system. Lourdes, you have your hand up?
I think GM does this, General Motors, for their rotational program. I remember something like this.
Yeah. Yeah, so those to me, that's a little bit of a difficult interview process because you don't get that immediate feedback of, am I doing well? Did I respond the question appropriately for this particular company? So that's something that we need to start keeping an eye on, and making sure that if you do go through that filter process of interview where you have to record yourself, it's going to be a little bit difficult, but you got to make sure that you go through those moves, exercises, talking to somebody else and recording yourself before you actually submit that final filter interview session. So that's one of the ones that literally has caught me off guard hearing about that situation. We mentioned follow up, right? Follow up. That's an important one. And in a virtual environment, how do you get, for example, Hariel's email, right? If I just see Hariel here, well, there's several things. In the meeting invite, you can look to see who are the participants, right? Sometimes the recruiter will CC Hariel, right? You can definitely look in, if there's an email, copy and paste it and write an email to Hariel, right? If there's no additional participants that were invited, they obviously did an internal invite and they copy pasted that particular link and they sent it to you to prevent you using the email, right? There's little ways to go about that. If I see Hariel Corsair, I know that's his full name. I can definitely see in Google what's the email format for XYZ company. For example, at Northrop Grumman, you use the first name dot last name at ngc.com, right? So I can deduce that if Hariel works for Northrop Grumman, this is just an example, you can say Hariel.Corsair at ngc.com, right? You send an email to that email address, and they'll be a little bit surprised that, how did this individual get my email? Well, they'll be surprised in a good way, because that individual can actually, find information and they're really interested in joining this particular company. So that's one of the little tips and tricks that I tell students to do, right? Reach out to the individual that you interview with and provide them a thank you email. Sometimes they will respond, most of the times they will not. They're instructed to not respond back and to let HR pretty much handle the communication. But if you say, thank you, I had a great opportunity with you, specify something specific that Hariel mentioned during that conversation. Make sure that you know exactly what you want, going back to Mindy's point, Hariel, in this case, to take away and remember you from when he's scoring, right? You should do this email no more than 24 hours after that particular interview, so that the memory in your mind, the information is current, right? And they also remember who you are. So that's one of the big things that I push for in regards to following up. Yes, Mr. Mike Cruz, and then we'll go asking the audience here or the participants.
Yeah. For follow up, how useful is LinkedIn for that person that you're talking with, and can you use it or should you use it?
Okay.
And the other thing, could you ask for a QR code? I mean, it's any methodology to follow up. I know a lot of the links they're anonymous.
Yep.
It's just the site,
Right.
and so and during your conversation, you may want to ask. Is it proper for me to follow up with you, or with who should I follow up with in case I have some more questions about this interview?
Yeah, no, for sure. No, you're right, Mr. Mike Cruz. So can you use LinkedIn? Yeah, you can definitely try that approach. You can definitely reach out and look at least the name of the individual. Like Hariel said, hey, I looked up so-and-so and I saw that they worked at TWA. I was able to see that they transitioned, how many years they actually worked at TWA, how many years they had in this other new position. So you can definitely do your research there, and that information might be available. You can also try to, and normally I do recommend trying to connect after the interview, so that way it doesn't seem like you're stalking the individual, right? But at least you're following up and you're saying, hey, I had a great conversation. Thank you for your time. If they accept you, great. If they don't, it's move on to the next situation. Lourdes, you have your hand up?
Oh, another great follow-up question towards the end, like Mike was saying, was is the timeline of like when do you guys expect making a decision? Should I hear back in a couple weeks, a month, just so the interviewee has an idea of what the timeline looks like. Granted, sometimes things fluctuate within a week or two, but if it's later than that, you probably know your answer. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. No, I definitely agree with you, Lourdes. And this is where it comes really handy. That's a little trick where you can actually use to your benefit when they say, "Do you have any questions?" And this is, tip for you. If you are asked, for the most part, every interview has, "Do you have any questions for us?" If you say no, to me, that means that you don't really care about being part of the team, right? Normally, my example to the young individuals is assume that you want to go out on a date with a young lady or a young man, right? And all of a sudden, everything's going great. There's a conversation and you feel that it's going great. If I ask the young lady, hey, do you tell me about yourself, any questions? And she says, no. I'm like, oh, wow, that's a big shutdown, right? That's a big crash and burn type of situation. So make sure that you take note of that. Ask questions. If you really want to show interest in the company, ask them questions. I mean, even this little tip that Lourdes alluded to, how soon do you anticipate making a decision on, right? A lot of students are pursuing an internship, and a lot of internships are for the summer. And right now we're in November, so they need to stack up and rack up by sometime end of November, beginning of December. That's when they need to know who and how many vacancies they will have, how many individuals are coming in. So if you are told, we'll call you back in a little bit, or you'll hear from us really soon, that's a good indication. That means that they will definitely let you know that you receive an offer. But if they say HR will communicate with you, that's an interesting situation, because HR now has the role of telling you, thank you for your time, we wish you well, please try applying to other positions available, right? So those are little things that you need to, the more you do this, the more experience you acquire, the more of the encrypted messages you will start seeing from one company. They normally do the same type of strategy, and you'll start picking up on it. The other thing is, if you have contacts, for example, with a particular company that you really want to work for, right? Ask those individuals, ask them, hey, you've been there for a while. Can you tell me what the work culture is like? Can you tell me if there's any particular core values that they promote internally? And core values are really interesting because you as the individual can definitely work those core values into the conversation. Teamwork. A lot of companies have something about teamwork in their core values, right? If in your opening statement you throw in, one of my core values is teamwork, I really appreciate and collaborate, etc., that gives the interviewer knowledge of, oh, okay, this individual actually mentioned core values. We actually have core values because all employees were indoctrinated within the core values of whatever company we work for. And we say, okay, they know, or they looked or researched the company core values. A lot of candidates don't really go that far, and that helps you as the individual to stand out a little bit by throwing some of those core values, or even the EPS, right? If there's a public company that's publicly traded, talk about, oh, I noticed that there's going to be earnings reports coming out XYZ date, right? And that's really great. I've been following the company for a while. Seems to be a great quarter for you guys. I'm really happy to join the team, and I know the fact that the product's really doing well. So if you throw something like that, a lot of young students, a lot of professionals that are looking for jobs, they're just honed in on trying to get the position. But if you look at all the business side of the company, you can definitely tell the interviewer, I'm not only interested in the position itself to get a paycheck, I'm interested in you as a whole. And that gives them a different perspective that you are a well-rounded candidate that really, really knows the company, and you will fit in really well within that. Lourdes, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have another feedback.
Hmm.
Given the situation and given the economic, turmoil that's going on, I like to ask, what's the stability, the economic stability? How do you protect your workers from, being laid off? Like, what does that plan look like for the company? And sometimes they mention what their plan is. Like, you can kind of see that record because sometimes a company can overhire and within 6 months, a year, there goes the layoff again. So you got to be careful, look for the stability and the economic success that you want.
That's great insight, Lourdes. Thank you. That's something to definitely keep top of mind. So, we're gonna go around the room. Any additional thoughts or comments? We're gonna start with Mindy.
So I'm going to have this one because I'm going to turn it around. I've seen a lot of interview topics, right? I've been involved with SHIP a long time, NSBE, SWE. In general, even in my coursework, I still remember being talked about interviews for preparation. I've been on the other side of it and have been a hiring manager. I'm still surprised at how many interviewees don't follow the basics of prepare. Why do you think that is? Like, I feel like, I mean, right now we can even Google Chat GPT this, right? Like, and it's going to come give you, here's what you should do before any interview. What are the group's thoughts on? I don't know if people see the same. Like, I find it really hard to find those like really prepared candidates. I feel like I have a lot of candidates who did not prepare a lot of the time. I'm just wondering if anyone else sees something similar in their industries.
Okay, so we're talking about the lack of preparedness from candidates, and I'm gonna ping on Mr. Mike Cruz because we just literally maybe a couple weeks ago, we went to a resume review and mock interview workshop that we conducted, and I want to hear his experience and thoughts about this.
Well, Mindy, you're right. There were some students
I'm
that
not
were
alone. Okay.
there were some, not all, but there were some students that just weren't prepared for the interview, even though they were there and they know what they needed to do, and they knew it was a mock interview. But some of them were not prepared. And so, that was a learning experience for them. I says, you need to know about the company. You need to, while you're here, you're asking for a job. Have you even developed a resume? So preparedness is a big issue, I think. And, that's our job, is to ensure that these students are made aware that this interview is a big thing. This interview could change your life for the rest of your life, and you need to be serious about it. And don't overbook. Don't try and. I always I guess the best advice I gave some of these students was, I asked them, what do you want to do? And they, well, I want to be an engineer. And I do that. And I said, well, what kind of engineer? Mechanical, electrical. Then you go down. You drill down to what they really want to do. So I think they have to do that themselves. They need to drill down, look at the company, what engineering discipline or STEM discipline they want to work in, and try to drill down and try and find a particular area that they would like to work on, knowing that may not only be the area. I says, have a plan B and C, have options of where you want to go. So a lot of them were, these are college students, and they'll be ready for a job next year, and they still have time to learn, but they need to be thinking about what they really want to do. And right now, a lot of the students, even when they're graduating, I had some fourth year, they're just graduating. They never did an interview.
Yeah.
They haven't done a resume, and they're out looking for a job. And it says, and I just shake, I had to just shake my head and says, well, you got a lot of catching up to do. You got a lot of introspect. And even then, at 4 year, graduating in May, they still didn't know exactly what they wanted to do. So I'm sure it's not anxiety, but it's just, a lot of the young students have so many options. They think the job may come to them. Well, probably not. And so they need to not only research the company, but they need to research themselves on what I would like to do as a professional and a long time career. A lot of
Yeah,
them
I think
haven't.
that's really good.
Yeah, they haven't thought that far. They go, well, I just want to work. I want to be an engineer, mechanical engineer. I had a couple, two students really jumped out at me. They want to become mechanical engineers. Okay, what kind? And I had to drill down and drill down. And finally, both of them, it was kind of uncanny. They want to be Formula One mechanics on Formula One cars. But it took that much time and energy out of me to find out what they wanted to do. And
So
they're
maybe
still,
feedback, like from an interview perspective, is introspect what you want and why you're applying to positions. So maybe that's the takeaway from an interviewee perspective, is understand why you're applying to these positions. And
but
maybe
they
not
don't,
do bulk
they may not know
applying.
exactly what they want. That's the problem.
Yeah, we all have to do that self-reflection at some point. Do I still know what I want? I don't know, but I can at least fake it till I make it.
Yeah, well, hopefully they'll get there. So these first opportunities and the mock interviews and whatever,
Mhm.
I think we try and drive the point home. What do you really want to do, and research that out. Research out the company, and then research out my talent, and see if how I can marry those together.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Harriel, any final thoughts, comments, or additional insights?
I just want to say ditto to everything that Mike just said. One thing is key is, like you said, know thyself, right? And that's something where we can help them with, right? Because, when we're talking to these students before they get to their senior year, start to kind of talk not only about what they want to do, but about the experiences that we've had being in the industry, what we've seen. And hey, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And again, some of these, I was talking to this one student who graduated from my alma mater, and I was like, I said, dude, I got you, man. I've been in the aerospace industry for, over 20 years, and just about anything I know, I got a contact for you. And he named something like having to do with space technology. It was like so new, and I was like, okay, I don't know anybody who does that, but let me, put you in contact with a friend of mine who works at SpaceX, and maybe you can continue that conversation with them. But yeah, you said it though, Mike. Know thyself, know what you're looking to do, and try to shoot for that. But yeah, I really feel not responsible, but I love the fact that I'm able to connect with students and make connections with people that I've known in the industry because I've been in it for so long. So yeah, we can help them as well.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that insight, perspective. Lourdes, any final thoughts or comments from you?
Reflecting on Mindy's question, I think it comes down to actually doing the work. No matter how much you research it and do the steps, and if you don't take the time to sit down and actually do it, practice it, then and get better at it every time, then that's what happens. You show up unprepared.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Lourdes. Alex, any final thoughts or comments from you, sir?
Yeah. So, one thing too that can come out of the interview, even if you don't get the position, is that you get referred. Like I have a perfect story. A coworker that I had. This happened in the '90s when he interviewed. He he didn't get the position, but the company referred him to a distributor that they work with, and they're like, "Hey, they're hiring. They're just down the street." So he went, got that interview, and he became owner of that distributor company, and retired a multi-millionaire. And the guy that got the position that he didn't get, he's still working in the industry and all that. So you never know, how these things work out. And on also, we talked about things not to do. I have examples too about how don't make the interview awkward as their interviewee. Because one time I had to interview somebody, and my boss was sitting next to me too, and we were interviewing him. And then out of nowhere, he's like, "Yeah, your website, the search function doesn't do anything." It's like, okay, that'll be fixed by IT, whatever. But that didn't have anything to do with the interview. So I don't know why he brought it up, but then the other thing he said, it was for a sales position, and then he said, oh, one of the things that I definitely don't want is to be micromanaged. And I mean, yeah, it's not like micromanaging, it happens often, but it does happen sometimes. But just by him saying that he shut himself off, or he shut the door on himself. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
those are great points. Yeah, that's great, great insight. Yeah, even if you visit the company's website and there's something wrong with the actual website, it's for you, but IT definitely might be aware of it, and you shouldn't necessarily point it out as an individual to them in the interview, right? Mr. Mike Cruz, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Alex, you bring up a good point about interviewing and talking with your peers and your superiors. A long time ago, I was taught in some grammar class or language class, uh, never use the negative. Never use a negative. Always trying to find out a positive way to express something that stay away from no and never and all those words, and always come up with, like I always said, I never have a problem. I have issues. I have opportunities, and keep it positive. So I think the takeaway here is never use negatives in an interview or when you're writing your resume.
What I've noticed is that a lot of students focus heavily on academics, mainly because whenever they look at, and that's great, but whenever they look at a website, they have to maintain a 3.5 GPA at least for engineering, and they feel pressured on that regard, right? And a lot of them believe that if they maintain a 3.5 when they graduate, they'll have a job, right? And that's to some extent that's a fairy tale now. And you have to be able to, going back to Lourdes and Mindy and Mr. Mike Cruz, do the work, do the preparation, make sure that you go to those resume workshops. Sadly enough, when we went to do the resume workshop and mock interview session, there were some individuals that didn't really have a resume, and they were third year, fourth years, and they only had literally one of them had nothing to show, and they said, "I have never done a resume." One of them actually had a Word document printed out, and he had little bullet points, and it was literally more of a list than a resume. This is the real situation that we are seeing at the moment with some of those students, some of those individuals. And this is why we bring the topic to the table. Interviewing tips, right? Preparation is really heavy. How do you even get a resume? If you don't know how to get a resume, there's resources for you. Go to the career services, Google it, get a template, start putting something in there, and then have it reviewed by any of us here. We'll be more than glad to at least give you our perspective, our comment. Obviously, we have some experience, but if you decide to go ahead and take a look at some of those information that's available, make sure that you do your due diligence and follow through with that, right? The other thing is that preparation makes a big difference. Rehearse those responses, rehearse those questions. So that's what we have to offer here through this cafecito chat. With that, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Hasta luego. Bye bye.